for joining us today. We're going to get started in just another minute. I think a few more people will be joining here. We appreciate you spending your time with us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever it is you're calling in from. All right. Again, I want to welcome you. Thank you for joining us at this pre-MBA info session hosted by Forte. Today, we're going to be talking about applications and applying in round 2, tips from some of our fellow and lovely MBA admissions experts. Before we jump into that, I just want to give a quick overview. If you are new here to Forte, welcome to our community. We are so excited you are here. If you are back, thanks for being here. My hope is that you've had a great experience with us so far and you're interested in the work that we're doing to get more women leading in business. We really are doing the most that we can with our influential companies, inspiring business school partners and leading donors like yourself to fuel the future of business by providing access and resources. We know that by having more women in MBA programs, we can get more women leading in business. And so we are here to talk about how you can continue along that journey. I also want to invite you to join us for our MBA Forum event. This is the final forum event of this season, if you will, or this year. It will be tomorrow, actually, at 11 a.m. Eastern. This is a great opportunity to hear from and see many of our other school reps from our member schools, as well as just get an idea for what our interactive Forte community looks like, understanding the value of an MBA, the resources available to you, and again, leaning into that community of support as you navigate this process. If you are in the point or at the point in your MBA journey, you're not just MBA curious anymore, but maybe you are a little bit further out in your timeline, not looking to apply until next application cycle, I would encourage you to check out our MBA launch program. This is our flagship application program here at Forte, designed to help you build your best, most competitive application, really breaking down each of the components, helping you develop who you want to be and your own personal brand through that process. And then again, giving you special access to our community members through that program. It is an accountability giving program, if you will. I will be there to help keep you accountable throughout the application timeline as you prepare your application. Provides you with a community of 500 to 600 women or individuals going through this process at the same time. Discounts on our partner services, including test prep materials and coursework that might be available to you. And then you also gain a special access to discounts on some fee waivers for some of our partner schools. Other individual events that are coming up. Again, I want to mention the forum tomorrow. If you are interested in the MBA launch program or learning more about that, we are having several sessions in the next week or two regarding that program. There's going to be a Reddit AMA on Monday if you want to tune in there, if that's where you are getting some of your information or taking lightly the information you're receiving on Reddit. That would be a good thing to tune into. We are also having an MBA launch specific information session on the 9th. And then we'll have a Q&A session talking with our team specifically what we're looking for in applicants, who makes a great fit for the launch program, really how it will benefit you, breaking down the curriculum and so forth. So feel free to join us for any of those events. You can scan that QR code. Any of these events, aside from the Reddit, will also be available on our YouTube channel for streaming. So feel free to check any of those out. I want to give a special thanks to all of our partners and our sponsors for today's event. You will have the awesome opportunity to hear from these amazing panelists as they talk from their own expertise and their own experience as admissions committee members. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm going to go by order of my screen. We'll just start first with introductions, and then we'll kind of get into each component. And Mikhail, you're there on the top of my screen if you want to go first.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mikhail Elliott. I'm Senior Associate Director of Graduate Admissions here at Mendoza College of Business. Really excited to talk with you today.
And Amanda, next.
Thanks so much. Yeah, my name is Amanda Wayner. I'm the Assistant Dean of the Georgetown MBA Admissions Team. Fun fact, I'm also a Flex MBA online student, so I have been in your shoes preparing an application as well, so I can give insight on both today.
Thank you. Elena, you're next.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Elena. I am an MBA recruitment executive on the MBA recruitment and admissions team here at Oxford Said in the UK. I look forward to answering any of your questions this evening. Thank you.
Great. Serena?
Hi there. Thanks for everyone for joining. I'm Serena Carr-Humphrey. I'm an Associate Director of Recruiting at Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota, and really excited to share some good tips and tricks as you think about applying here in these kind of upcoming rounds.
Great. And last, but certainly not least, Lindsay.
Thank you. Yeah, Lindsay Haberman, the Associate Director of MBA Recruitment and Admissions here at UC Irvine, the Mirage School of Business. Excited to talk to you all more.
Thank you. And thanks again for being here. Attendees, thank you for being here. We are going to dive in and get some tips and tricks and any advice that you might need per application component. Then we have a few general questions, and we do have some time potentially for questions from you also. If you wish to use the Q&A feature at the bottom panel in the Zoom, you're welcome to do that. We'll keep an eye on it and toss those questions up towards the end. But again, I want to remind you that the attendees, wherever you are in the process, maybe just starting your application, maybe you are putting your final touches on your applications for January, we are glad that you're here, and we want to help you make this an easy process. So I'm going to start first with what I think is the most tedious, the most overwhelming, the most daunting part of the application. The test or the academics, I would say. One thing we have no control over, right? Our past academics, they're kind of done. It is what it is, but that test can be that pesky thing. So Mikhail, can you talk to us a little bit about the test and how that is evaluated academically in your application?
Absolutely. So know that the test, as well as your past academic performance, really work together to tell us and give us a sense of your preparedness for the rigor of the program. So you'll also want to be evaluating where you fall within our general class profile when it comes to things like the GPA as well as the test scores. And so as you are submitting your information as far as your academic performance, know that we will not be evaluating just the GPA in isolation. We'll be looking for those peaks and valleys. We'll be looking for the rigor of the classes that you took, your major course load. We'll also be looking at any leadership experiences, any other ways that you were involved in your community. You might also want to speak to any extra curriculars, as well as maybe if you worked during undergrad. Those are all things we might want to hear about in your extra essay, if that is something that you need to speak to as far as maybe why those weren't as strong in your academic performance. Keep in mind that many of the students that apply can handle the rigor of the work. And so we're also evaluating how competitive you are as far as the pool that we receive. And so know that that's something that we will be evaluating. If you come from a less quantitative background, you might also want to use that optional essay to address some of those challenges that we might see with your quantitative performance. And then, of course, with the tests, that is a way that you can show us that you are prepared for the rigor of the program. If you do have the time, I would suggest taking a GMAT and a GRE practice test. This can kind of give you a feel for where your natural strengths lie. And so you're not maybe wasting time on a test where ultimately your strengths just aren't compatible with. There's differences between the tests as far as whether or not you can go back to another question, how much time you have to spend on another question. And so know that there are options as far as taking the GMAT and GRE, so you'll want to talk to the schools that you're interested in to understand which test might be best for you. I know that there are many questions around, utilizing a waiver for a test these days. My recommendation would still be to take a test because it still makes you more competitive for things like scholarships if you are able to send us in a competitive GMAT or GRE score. Again, if you're not satisfied with those test scores, you can take them again. I speak for Mendoza when I say, exhibiting a level of resilience in the application process and showing that you've taken the test multiple times. Those students who maybe have switched tests, it speaks to who you are as an individual and your ability to handle challenges, and that grit speaks to who you are as an individual as well. So with that, that rounds out my piece for academics and GMAT GRE.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I think two good things that you really mentioned. talk to the schools. They accept both tests, or maybe even the executive assessment first. And so there's no trick. Like, they're not giving you options and then going to penalize you if you take one or the other. So the advice to take practice tests, see which test you're comfortable with, take the exam, prepare for the exam that is right for you. And one thing I always have to remind people that the test in your GPA is just one data point. As far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, if this is how any of you all do it, I don't know of a single program that is sorting all of their applications by test score or GPA and blindly cutting anyone below or above a cutoff. So that's nothing you need to worry about. To Mikhail's point, check the class profile, but these two things are working very hand in hand together. You have an opportunity to explain if there are low valleys or time off or a job or something else was happening at the time. So take advantage of that and just know it's one piece of the puzzle. Thank you, Mikhail, for that. I'm going to move on. Lindsay, the next thing, that work experience or your resume or CV in the application.
Yeah, I think this is such an important part of the application when you're kind of applying to full-time MBA programs. Work experience is going to be important. I think it's important to kind of be able to highlight some of your strengths and skill sets that you have accomplished in your work experience, whether it's really strong leadership skills, project management skills, problem-solving skills, even quantifiable results where you can kind of show, your impact that you had on a specific project. I think all of those data points are really important to highlight. I think it's, we're looking at your experience as kind of, what have you done kind of to what you're looking to do, and how successful will you be in that job search when you are out kind of looking for internships and post MBA jobs. So I think being able to really highlight some of those skill sets that are very transferable skills that most companies are looking for in your resume is going to be really important as you kind of maybe fine tune your resume a little bit, and know that when you come into the program, you're going to be working with our Career Center, who is going to kind of help you. I mean, your resume might not look the same as it did when you applied versus when you start applying to internships and jobs. So I think, really kind of working well with our career team to kind of help fine tune those resumes will happen when you get into the program. But I think from kind of a standpoint of applying, I think just making sure any type of, again, I think teamwork, leadership, problem solving skills. We do like to see kind of growth, progression. I think that's important too, to see, kind of you've moved up into maybe, been promoted. I mean, those are all really good things to highlight. I think, companies are looking for those kind of soft skills that are really important for most MBA roles that you will be applying to. So yeah, I do think, making sure you're highlighting those points is going to be really important when you're applying and then kind of moving through the program. But do know, I think students always say, wow, my resume looks a lot different now that I'm in the program from when I applied. So that's the great, value with an MBA, that you're going to have a career team that's really going to work very closely with you to really fine tune your resume. So yeah, I mean, I think if you highlight those things and are really able to talk to your experience well, yeah, those are really important things to look at in a resume.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And hitting the fact that, like, once you get in, then the school is going to brand you and help you reformat or get your resume where it needs to be. And I guess on that point, and Lindsay, if you have any additional tips, or like, is there a specific template or things you should or should not do when it comes to your resume? I think we see as AdCom members, and I'm speaking as my former self, a lot of different formats, and some are fine, some are not. Any advice there?
Yeah, I think, just kind of a standard MBA template, you can find them all online. I think some students, students come in with different backgrounds, right? You can see resumes that come in maybe with somebody that has more of like a creative marketing background. And so they do look different, and that's okay. Again, like I said, I think it's more important about the content and about the, you know, bullet points and about your impact. Because again, I think once you get into the program, things will really start to change a little bit with your resume. The only thing I would say is try to keep it, I mean, a page, 2 pages. I think anything longer than that, it is, you know, kind of not, you know, they're not really looking to see a 4-page resume. I think being really concise in a page or 2 to highlight those points that I spoke about is going to be, you know, something that really stands out. So I would really try to keep it within 2 pages. But yeah, I mean, a professional format, I think that you're applying to a professional business school. So I think that is always probably best tip. Try to kind of put it into more of a professional format.
Thank you so much for hitting that. And similar to what Mikhail talked about, looking at the class profile to get the data points, the years of experience on a class profile is just an average. And so just keep that in mind. Don't self-select yourself out by that. It really depends on the impact you're making, the progression you're having, and the quality of those work experience. Serena, up next with the letters of recommendation.
Absolutely. So thinking about letters of recommendation, so we've talked a little bit about the academic piece. Lindsay hit on the resume. Thinking about letters of recommendation, I would say this kind of aligns with what we would consider your professional profile. As you think about business school, it really is that career tool to help you get from point A to point B. So we really want to get to know who you are professionally. So as you think about letters of recommendation, certainly you might think, oh, maybe I could use a previous academic contact, or maybe I might use, you know, someone from an NGO. Certainly those are great, but when you think about a strong letter of recommendation, it's typically coming from that professional space. Thinking about maybe current supervisors, previous supervisors. If you're someone that works for maybe a family business or has your own business, thinking about clients, vendors, individuals that you've worked with that maybe don't necessarily work below you could all be great options as you think about who can really speak towards who you are professionally. Sometimes I hear students say, well, I'm going to have the CEO of my company write me a letter of recommendation. And then I always ask, you know, well, how closely do you work with your CEO? Do they know you day in and day out? So really thinking about, yeah, certainly a title is important, but we want to connect with you professionally. So really thinking about those individuals who work with you and can really speak towards who you are. Lindsay highlighted some of those skills that we're looking for, whether that's leadership, collaboration, coachability. And so I believe everyone here on the call, we use that GMAC common letter form as far as recommendations. It's more of a Likert survey style recommendation with some areas for open-ended responses at the end. So when you're working with your recommenders, I always say that is a great thing to let them know, just because I think sometimes it can be a little lighter of a lift on your recommender in comparison to maybe, say, crafting that full type of letter. The other thing I always call out when you think about letters of recommendation is really giving your recommenders plenty of time to meet the deadline that you're aiming for. So many times in admissions, I see the final piece being a letter of recommendation that does not come in on time, and it pushes that applicant to, say, the next round. So giving your recommenders plenty of time to get those done can be great. And then finally, I would say, you know, if you're an individual that maybe hasn't told your employer you're applying to business school, or maybe you just started on a new team, but you've got someone else that you worked with a ton, you can also use that optional statement to maybe tell us why you selected the recommenders that you did. I know we've talked about other ways that you can use that optional statement, but that's just a call out too from the professional space, because we know teams change, management changes, so sometimes you do have to, you know, go back in that previous Rolodex of who else you've worked with. So I would say those are just a few of the call outs as you think about letters of recommendation for the application.
Great, thank you. And on that note, giving them plenty of time, January deadlines will come right after a significant holiday for a lot of people. So if you haven't yet connected with your references, I would say you should probably do that sooner rather than later, just so you can be mindful of their time, their holiday plans, and you're not cutting it close with that deadline. So thank you for that reminder, Serena. Elena, essays. What do you think? Tell us.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is perhaps the most comprehensive part of the application. And in regards to the Oxford MBA application, I would say, firstly, we require a personal statement, which is just 250 words. And here we would love to see information that has not been included previously in the application. So you can speak about your motivation to apply for the program, perhaps your personal story, anything that you think will make you stand out from other candidates that we see on a daily basis. So this is perhaps your only chance to show us who you are as an individual behind, your career, your journey so far. Anything that you would like the committee to know about you beyond your professional journey, beyond your application. So I would say this is perhaps your only opportunity to showcase yourself, your personality, because otherwise you just, answer predetermined questions, about your experience, about your skills. But perhaps you would like to showcase something about your personality, which is something that you can do with a personal statement. I would say with the other essay that we have, and this is perhaps actually the most comprehensive section of the application, which is obviously your post-MBA career plan, and there will be many questions that you will have to respond in the application. Obviously, your ambitions post-program. We would love for you to be as detailed as you can with your answers in terms of what you would love to do post-MBA, why this program in particular. So what do you think you will be able to get out of the program? How do you think the program can help you with your career goals? And we would love to see that you have done research before applying in terms of, again, how the program can help you and what steps have you already taken perhaps to achieve your career goals. And what you will also be doing after the MBA to, again, hopefully secure those career goals. We also encourage you to include a plan B, in your career goals, just to show flexibility, adaptability in case you change your mind, which is something that happens all the time during the MBA. So this is completely acceptable. It's just for you to have a safety net, to fall back on in case, again, you change your mind, or just to have something, to fall back on. Perhaps your circumstances change as well. So it's really important to include the plan B. And obviously, we will discuss into more detail with you in the interview when it comes to your career goals, your experience so far, and be sure we will ask you some questions about your plan B as well. So I would say these are the essays. And again, just like my colleagues mentioned so far, it's important you take the time to really, put those words together. Because again, we are approaching the holiday season, and you won't want to spend your holiday, quickly finishing your application. So it's really important to start early, if you can, and you will be surprised how many questions there will be in the application. And it's important again to take the time and just put those words on paper. And obviously, it's important to mention as well that, again, just like my colleagues have mentioned, the post-MBA plan, the essays are just a component of the application. So it's important for you to also focus on the other components just as much, because in that way we'll be able to understand, your whole story and your journey so far and why the MBA makes sense for you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to ask for the other panelists, if you don't mind dropping one of your prompts, your essay prompts in the chat, just so folks can get an idea of the various different kinds of questions. Obviously, Oxford, Elena, you just mentioned a personal statement, post-MBA goals, and a plan B. Some other schools have much more creative or different questions. They're trying to gain different information. And so the essays really shouldn't be one size fits all for all schools. And also keep in mind that some of them will be short answer with a character limit. Some of them are actual essays, and that can vary by application. So I like to also remind you, they want to hear from you as a unique candidate. So don't tell them just what you think you want to hear. Don't have a robot write your essay for you. Make sure you're familiar with that. They genuinely want to hear from you. And also make sure, and Elena, you mentioned this, you're telling them new information. unless the essay specifically asks you to rephrase or summarize your resume, don't do that in your essay. They don't need that. That's not new information. And they really do want you to take advantage of the opportunity to tell them new information. So thank you all for dropping those prompts in there. If you want to continue doing that, I think that'll get some thoughts moving for some of our attendees here who are trying to think of, how do I prepare to even start writing these essays? The last kind of component I want to talk about before we move into some prearranged questions. And as a reminder for the attendees, if you do have questions, please drop them in the Q&A. I know we have received 1 or 2 in there. We'll get to those in just a minute. But Amanda, talk to us a little bit about the interview, which is another kind of component of not necessarily the application, but the evaluation process within an MBA journey.
Definitely. Yeah. So the interview, this is where you really get to show your personality, who you are as a person. It gives that live perspective of you as an applicant. So things to consider when you're applying to multiple schools. First of all, I'd look at the format for each school. Everyone does a different process. So at McDonough, for example, we do an initial review and then we invite you to interview. Other schools I know have like a video component. So it looks a little different at each school. So make sure you understand what that looks like at your schools. Same thing with the timing. I know I get people who have questions. They say like, oh, it's been weeks, I haven't heard anything. So for us, you can be invited the entire application review time. So take a breath, take a time. It's hard to wait, I know. But that interview invite will likely be coming. So make sure you got your ducks in a row and kind of when it all happens, where it happens. Think about, do you want to travel to campus? Do you want to do it virtually? People take different approaches. So map that out for your schools. But in terms of evaluation, how do we look at the applicants during the interview? We're considering you from a few different perspectives. So first of all, from a faculty perspective, so thinking about looking at your work experience and what you'll bring to the classroom discussion. We think about the student perspective. So is this someone I'd want to work on a team with? So there's a lot of group projects in the MBA program that can speak to that. I've got one due today, for example. But yeah, is this someone you want to be working long hours with and have in your team and your network post-MBA? And then finally, from a recruitment perspective, so is this person competitive for post-MBA employment, for those internships as well? So prepare just like you would for a job interview. So you want to have great examples from your resume, from your job experience to highlight in the interview. I've had some really great interviews actually in round 1 this year at McDonough of people who did a great job of highlighting multiple dimensions to their candidacy. So they were highlighting work they did, volunteer work, other kind of like part-time experiences they had outside of their full-time job, which I love. I love that well-rounded perspective of an applicant. So prepare for that. I know there are rundowns out there if you Google it of like the questions schools ask. So look them up, get an idea of what people are asking. There are questions are going to come your way, like why do you want an MBA? Why this school? What are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? So be ready for those. They're coming, prepare for it. So prepare for those questions. And then also the research about the school. I know we just talked about that with the essays, but it's important in the interview too. And you want to go a bit deeper than just the buzzwords, right? So for example, I worked on the marketing team for a long time. I know the buzzwords, I wrote them, right? So don't just repeat them back to me, go a level deeper. Tell me why those matter to you. So for example, at Georgetown, we're a really global school. A lot of people tell me they like it, but why do you like it? Why is it important for your career? And what does that mean to you to be a part of that type of community? So go a level deeper, think it through, really reflect on why you're applying to those schools and what what that school can really bring that's unique to offer you. So yeah, that's what I would say for interviews. Have fun with it. Don't stress too much. We are excited to get to know you. We're interested in you based off of what you've seen in your application. So yeah, come in strong.
Awesome. Thank you. And that is a very conclusive overview of what AdComps are looking for in each of the application components and throughout the evaluation process. So I appreciate your insights for our all of our attendees. And thank you for dropping the questions, your essay prompts or questions or what you're looking for in the chat. I think this is really, really cool to know and reconfirming, I guess, for the attendees that they want to know about you as a whole unique person throughout the process. And so don't be afraid to bring yourself, not who you think they want to the interviews or throughout the application, but really be authentic with your goals and talk about what you bring that's unique. So we're going to go through some prearranged questions. And I know we kind of touched on this a little bit for Lindsay. I had asked you about some maybe mistakes or kind of things to avoid in the resume, but in general, I'll open it up for anybody and I'll kind of take your cue based on who goes off mute. What are some common application mistakes you see when people rush through the application process or just in general with their application? Anybody? Go ahead.
I can jump in.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so I think, somebody said this earlier, like do your research on the program you are applying to. I think the biggest mistake I have seen is, I kid you not, another school's, name in somebody's essay. You really have to really be, specific and take your time when you're writing these essays. They are really important. I truly love reading our essay, watching our video essay, because again, it gives the student time to really explain more about themselves, why specifically the MBA, but really why specifically UCI. So I think somebody that, has attended an event, talked to a student, really incorporate those things into your essays, because I do see quite frequently where students, it almost looks like a blanket, like I copied and pasted it for multiple schools that I'm applying to. And it's noticeable, I think. So, I really do love the essays. I think it brings a student to life. So take your time, be thoughtful, do your research on the school, and really incorporate those things into what you're writing in your essays.
Thank you, Lindsay. Elena, you had something I think you were going to contribute.
Yeah, it was essentially the same thing, just making sure that you really customize the content of the application based on the program you apply to, because different programs have, different focuses, different application questions as well. And like Lindsay said, you'll be surprised, how many times we see different schools included in the essay or perhaps even in the references. And it's a good idea to perhaps ask a colleague or even a close friend to proofread your application for you, because you will apply to multiple schools and it's easy, I think, to make that mistake. So yeah, maybe just do that to ensure that you haven't included, the wrong information. And again, not copy paste the same exact application to the programs you are applying for.
It can be tempting as a candidate. You have so much going on and the process can seem very similar, but you can clearly see in our chat that they each want different things. So they might seem similar, but to avoid putting the wrong school in the wrong application, I would suggest not copying and pasting your essays. Great tip, both of you. Mikhail, I see that you're off mute. Any other kind of mistakes that you see through the application?
Sure. I've seen some inconsistency in people's stories. I understand that the application process is kind of long and your goals may evolve. However, I think that being able to communicate that with the admissions committee on a consistent basis is going to be helpful, because it helps us to understand your story better. So making sure that, if you've indicated an interest in product management and tech, that is also the story that we're getting in your essays, that we're also getting in your video interview, that we're also getting when you come to campus and talk to us in person. And if that has evolved, then you can tell us about it. However, making sure that story is consistent so that we have an understanding of maybe even how your current strengths translate into what that next role is for you. And so just making sure that those goals are consistent and that your story is consistent as you go through the application process.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I feel confident that our attendees here today will be able to avoid many common mistakes in their application from taking your expertise. The next kind of general question, and I guess Amanda or Serena, I'll let one of you start with this. With the application deadlines being during the busy season for admissions committee and the holiday season, if you will, what does that mean for applicants? And I think, Amanda, you kind of hit on this, like, you're not going to get a response from us as soon as you submit your application. Like it takes time to process. So anything else to add on that?
Yeah, happy to jump in. Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing, especially around this time of year, I think, is planning ahead. So, we were all discussing actually before we signed on that like a lot of us have a holiday break coming up. So the office is going to be closed for a little bit. So maybe take some time before that time to see, do you have any burning questions about the application process? Because a lot of our offices will be closed for a little bit leading up to that application deadline. So that's something to consider. I would also consider, like we mentioned before, making sure your recommender has the appropriate deadlines. I think the holiday break can be a benefit in some ways. If you have a little more room to breathe, you're probably a little more well rested if you have time off. Like you've got a clear headspace to come into this, which I think can help, honestly. But that also means you need to like carve out the time and say, there's all this fun stuff to do, but okay, like I've got to commit for a few hours to like focus it on this. And same thing with your recommendation provider. So a little extra planning, I'd say, but hopefully you can approach it with like a more relaxed, fun headspace.
Great, thank you. Serena?
Yeah, the only thing that I would share there is so thinking about breaks, things like that. Certainly sometimes I think we all see this too, where, we'll get some outreach and then individuals might send a bit more outreach. So thinking like, oh, they didn't get my email, I'm just going to resend it again. And then next thing you know, you've got 3 emails from the same person saying the same thing. So just give us that grace to get back to you, knowing that we have kind of these holiday breaks coming up. But then thinking about planning ahead, we've talked about letters of recommendation, but I'll also just add that for like the personal statement. Amanda kind of said, setting some time aside to like get things done. But also I think giving yourself plenty of time to have someone read your personal statements, things like that. So although the holidays, sometimes things slow down, they also pick up for others. So just being mindful, I think, of some of those application items, but then giving us in the admissions and recruiting world a little bit of grace to get back to you because we will be kind of out of the office, or different team members might be out of the office. One person might be in. So it might be a little slow going as you think about the holiday season.
That's a great point, Serena. And not only do you have 3 emails from the same person in your inbox, but somehow the deans and directors and the president of the college are also copied on there. I would try to avoid that if you can, as a candidate to these programs. The one other thing that I think is important, and as a former school rep, and these school reps know this, the schools spend a lot of time and have great intention of what they put out on their websites and the events that they're having and the information they're sharing with you. And so maybe before you ask a question, you could get on their school's blog or watch a recording of the admissions Q&A or an info session, or read their website to see if your question is answered there. Not to say that the reps don't want to help you. Quite literally, they are people. It's their job to help you through this process. However, there's still a little bit of ownership for you to help yourself in this process. Take accountability for all of the information that you already have available. Use critical thinking skills. How does this apply? Does this answer my question? Do I need to be in someone else's inbox? So thank you for that reminder, Serena. Let's talk after they hit submit. What can they do? What should they do aside from emailing you 20 times to say, did you get my application? Anyone want to chime in? Elena, you're at first off mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, aside from the obvious, which is just ensuring that, all the application components have been submitted, I think it's important for everyone to just take a moment to celebrate. Like, this is perhaps the hardest part of the process. And hopefully the next stage will be just an interview. And I think the waiting time might seem like a lot, especially when, you've submitted your application before the deadline and it's going to take some time to get a decision. But something that we encourage applicants, in particular for the Oxford MBA, is if you are shortlisted for an interview, which is great, it's important to read the application again, just to remind yourself of the content, which might seem like a silly little thing, but I think it's important because, again, if it's been a few weeks, and you've submitted multiple applications, I think it's a good idea to just have a quick look and see what you've written in the application. But yeah, unfortunately, there is not much you can do. I think, again, it's a bit of a stressful time while you're waiting for the decision. Perhaps don't chase the admissions committee, because we will be sending you a decision on the final decision date, which is also on our website. And this is also what you've said earlier, just making sure that you double check. But yeah, just take a moment to celebrate because, like I said, perhaps the hardest part of the process has already been completed. So now, hopefully, the next stage is your interview.
I love that. I love a celebration, and you all deserve it. Once you hit submit, it is something worth celebrating, crossing that off, checking the box on that. I think one thing I always like to encourage folks is in not stopping your research. The school's not going to stop evaluating you, so you shouldn't stop evaluating the school. And just as the schools are giving you all this information on admissions and the application components, is there information on preparing for your interview? Like, can you focus on that next or the next step? Give yourself a break. Of course, you deserve a small little break and to enjoy your time, but there's things that, the schools are being intentional with, again, the information they're pushing at you at that particular time or wherever you are in the process. Anyone else want to add or any ideas of what they can do after they hit submit? Okay, I'm going to jump into a few questions here. I have one, and Lindsay, I'm going to turn this over to you. Do schools prefer one-page or two-page resume if both are structured professionally? I think you kind of already touched on this a little bit. Anything else that you wanted to add on there?
Yeah, I mean, one or two, I think depending upon your experience, right? I mean, if somebody has like 7 years of experience, their resume most likely will be kind of 2 pages, I think. Maybe somebody that has like 3 years experience might, their resume might be able to be more in kind of that 1-page format. So yeah, I think it's also important, like I know a lot of students will like to list maybe like research publications and things that, maybe those things could be admitted to really kind of focus in on your, experience, your roles, your positions, your impact. So maybe think through that. If your resume kind of fits a little bit longer than 2 pages, kind of taking out some of those could really help. I think just focusing in on the experience is what it should look like. But 1 to 2 pages really, I think, dependent upon somebody's years of experience too.
Do any of your schools give specific instructions? I know some schools say only 1 page or only 2 pages. Any of you fall into that? Like give that specific instruction? Okay. Applicants or attendees while you're here, just be mindful. Like the school will tell you if they want something specific, they're going to tell you. They're not going to make you guess for what it is that they're looking for. Another anonymous question coming in, and I'm going to put this for Elena because I think it goes along with what you had mentioned. Post MBA goals and a plan B kind of shows your flexibility. It says, thanks for your time. Can you talk about the long and short-term goal essay? For the short-term goal, do you like to see a backup plan option and that in case your first option might not work? Or I guess maybe is the backup plan more of for that long-term 10-year plan? Any thoughts?
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, a plan B is I think just a plan B. It doesn't necessarily need to be for your short or long-term career goals. I think if you have it there in the application, then, that's all we care about, because again, it just shows flexibility from your end, because we see, all the time students change their minds during the MBA. Perhaps, they were really fixated on an idea based on, their research, based on conversations they might have had. But during the MBA, perhaps they meet someone new, or they just choose an elective that, they didn't even think about. And that perhaps can spark an interest in a particular industry that, they didn't consider before. So it's something that we see all the time. So just having a plan B, something that, like I said earlier, is your safety net, something to fall back on, is super important to have, because again, it just shows that if your first plan doesn't work, or maybe if you change your mind, then you're not, completely stuck. And after the MBA, you have, a plan B to go back to. So even if it's your short-term plan or your long-term plan, it doesn't really matter as long as something is there, like I said, as a safety net for you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add on that? Sometimes the short-term goals and long-term goals are like very short, limited to almost like a tweet size. So you might not have room to put a plan A or a plan B in there. So just be mindful of, those limitations or the instructions that you're given when you're in the application. A good question came in here about when explaining why XYZ school or why a specific school in essays, how do you recommend balancing program-specific details like courses, clubs, and professors with the cultural fit or insights gained from student conversations? Is there a right or wrong? Is there somewhere else you can kind of indicate your demonstrated interest or other ways to show your connections with the current student body? Anyone?
I can chime in here. I don't necessarily think that there's like a right or wrong amount of balance to include in that piece, but we always say you really want to make sure you're answering those prompts in their entirety. So making sure that you're truly answering the questions that we provide. But I think there's something to be said about just research as you think about your career goals. So how do you bring that in? But then as you think about culture and fit, I think there's a way to kind of leverage those student communications that you've had. So there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all model, but I definitely think that kind of both perspectives as you think about things that you're finding on the website, doing that research on the curriculum, along with kind of the overall like culture of the school can really come from two different areas. So figuring out, how to include that, but being mindful of the page requirements, as well as trying to really complete your thought and answering it in its entirety. And again, that's sometimes where a second set of eyes really makes sense too. Like, am I kind of conveying the message that I want? Does it make sense? But I don't necessarily think that there's, if you have 3/4 of this and 1 cup of this, that makes for the perfect, response. I think we can all say that, it's very holistic and there's no like one size fits all model in the admissions process.
Thank you for that. I think this is kind of a follow-up again from Catherine here. Do any of you 1 to 2 aspects of a school's culture or approach that candidates often overlook, but they actually define the student experience? Anything they should be looking for in their research as far as culture goes? Mikhail, I see you're off mute.
Yeah, so I'll speak to the level of alumni engagement. I think that is something that students can get a feel for in the prospect process as they are engaging with admissions officers. They can also ask to be connected with alumni and have an understanding of maybe how alumni have impacted their current student outcomes and other alumni's outcomes. And so understanding the level of networking that is going into the process while you are in your MBA program. Of course, you are going into an MBA program to get a job. Networking is a large portion of that. And so understanding the culture around networking and alumni engagement is going to be a huge piece to understand the culture.
I would also add the student culture as well. So how is it a competitive program? Is it a more collaborative program? So what is kind of the vibe, for lack of a better word, between the students? What does that look like? And what do you want out of that? Are you someone who thrives in that competitive culture, or are you someone who wants that like collaborative, really strong knit community? So that would be also something to consider.
Great points. Yeah, you want to make sure you mesh with the people you're attempting to join for a couple of years. Mikhail, I'm going to put this one to you because you talked specifically about kind of the tests and the academics. This person says that they already have a GMAT or GRE waiver. I'm assuming it's already been granted. They want to know if there's a benefit to still sending GRE scores in terms of improving admissions or scholarship fellowship chances.
It can. Sure. Yeah, it can. My recommendation would be to, of course, take the test, regardless of if you've received the waiver. And for those schools where you might be a little bit more competitive, so looking around the average and higher for those test scores, would definitely recommend utilizing that score because it can make you more competitive for scholarships. And so again, it might be a conversation that you have with an admissions representative and say, hey, you can have an honest conversation without submitting those scores and just determine whether or not it might be to your benefit.
I have one thing to add there too. So as you think about, if you've granted a waiver and taken an exam, I would also just encourage connecting with your admissions team to understand too, like when is the cutoff to provide scores when applying? Because sometimes I see students submit their application on a waiver, but maybe they're not taking the exam for maybe a month or 2 months. And at that point, the decisions may have already been made as you think about admissions. So you want those if you're planning on taking the exam and you want the team to review it, you just want to be mindful of the times when you can submit those exams, because sometimes I think you'll submit with the waiver and then want to send those test scores after. So just making sure you understand that cutoff of when they would be reviewed with your application.
Great. Thank you. And I think that that also answers another question of latest you recommend taking the GRE. Check with the schools. Check with them also if they've given you a waiver. They might have a different rule of like, no, please don't send us scores, or, you know, whatever the situation may be, but just make sure that you are aware of what the policy is, the waiver policy, or that process at each individual institution. A couple questions are kind of aligned here in terms of back to the resume. What about experiences while in undergrad, or I'll even throw it back a little bit further. Sometimes we often saw before undergrad experiences on a resume. How do you suggest, or where can it fit in? Is it important to include TA jobs, internships out of the industry related to your goals? Where should those kind of things be included in your application? Whether it be your resume, an extra statement, anything like that. Anybody? Lindsay, I can turn it back to you since you talked about resumes a little bit. Or Amanda, you're off mute.
Sure, I'm happy to take it. I would recommend leaving them off your resume unless they're truly very significant, or you don't have a lot of years of work experience. So that experience, it's great. It served its purpose, but now we're looking to post-undergraduate experience. I'd say in undergrad, things that I do see highlighted that I think make sense, like were you an athlete? That's substantial. Like were you given like scholarships or fellowships or something like that? Like those really phenomenal things that you did in undergrad, sure, include those, but don't make that the majority of your resume. We want more recent experience. Again, I'd say the caveat to that would be if you have something really phenomenal in terms of internships, or if you're more recent out of undergrad, then okay, yeah, you might want to spend a little bit more room there to highlight your experience. But otherwise, we're looking at post-undergraduate, full-time paid work experience. Don't waste your resume space on that since it is so limited, quite honestly.
Thank you. All right. Well, we have gotten through the majority of our questions here, and so I know we're coming up on time. I am just going to, in the effort of uplifting our community and being a member of support, I'm going to go around to each of you for any words of advice that you might have for candidates that are kind of in the thick of it right now, whether it be test prep or preparing their application, or maybe are starting to doubt themselves for those January deadlines. And we'll go in the same order as we did for introduction. So Mikhail, not to put you on the spot first, but you're up with your advice.
Sure, no problem. I do always tell candidates to really work on refining their why. Ultimately, we want to understand your motivations for pursuing graduate education, and working on refining that why, knowing where you want to go and how we fit into that story is really just going to help it flow off of your tongue as you're in those interviews, as you're writing your essays. And so work on refining that, and you should be in a good spot.
Great. Amanda?
Sure. I'm going to choose to answer this from a student perspective. So like I said, I'm part of the Flex MBA online program. I'm coming up on my last semester in the spring. So I will say, I know it's hard to prepare all the materials. It's a lot of work, but on the other side of it now, looking back, I'm so happy that I took the leap and worked through those low moments to get here. Looking back at the last year, at least, I've been in it for 2 years now, but looking back at all the experiences I had this year, I'm just really proud of where I am right now. And so I'd encourage you, take the leap, take the time during the holidays to get it done, and yeah, take the leap.
Thank you. Always bet on yourself. I like that, Amanda. I'm glad you bet on yourself too. Elena?
Yeah, my advice would just be, and this is also what you said earlier, Sarah, in terms of just being authentic and not including information that you think the schools want to see about you. Just be yourself, and we will appreciate that more. And also just reach out if you have any questions. I think this is super important. Don't just assume, certain things, certain aspects about the application, and the admissions officers are always, super happy to help. That's why we are here. So just reach out and we will be more than happy to help.
Serena?
Yeah, really good insights shared already. But I would say when you think about the application process, there's an entire part of the application that we review. I think sometimes we might say, oh, that video essay, it was terrible. I don't want to hit submit. Or, oh no, you know what? That my GPA is great, but that test score I'm a little nervous about. Don't let those be the reasons you don't hit submit on the application. It's such a holistic process. There's so many components of the application that we review our areas to pull in strengths. So of course you want to apply when you feel competitive and you feel confident in your application. But I would also say that we're human. And again, there's not that one size fits all model, or there's not that perfect application. So just know that even if there's maybe a blemish somewhere, there's so many other areas to pull in strengths as you think about hitting submit.
Lindsay?
Shoot, I was last, but I'm going to take it on more of a, kind of personal level, right? Like this is an most students are looking at this as like their next, career move and an investment in kind of yourself. And so when you think of it like that, I mean, you really want to do research. I mean, do research on the programs you're applying to. I know we all have probably student ambassadors that would be happy to connect if you have any of those questions, right? Like, I know it's hard sometimes being like, oh, I don't really want to ask the admissions team, ask a student. They're more than happy to share their experiences, and they are just wealths of like resourceful, just fantastic individuals that really want to share their experience and what it's like being a student and what it's like being in your shoes. They've all gone through this process and they know it is daunting, and they are great. So I know maybe sometimes it might be hard to be like, oh, I don't know if I want to ask that question to the admissions director. There's students that you could ask some of those questions to really help you kind of get to the finish line and submit that application. So that's my piece of advice.
Amazing. Thank you again, all of you, for spending your time with us, for your sponsorship and your support, for being members of Forte and important community members, not just to our team, but to all of these amazing candidates that will be heading your way soon. For those who joined us today, thank you for being here. If you have questions about anything we talked about today, the work Forte is doing, the programs we offer, upcoming events, please don't hesitate to reach out to our team. Again, we are here to help support you on this pre-MBA journey, whether you're just MBA curious or you are moving along a little bit further closer to submitting. We wish you the best of luck and hope everyone has a happy and safe holiday season upon you. And we'll chat soon. See everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.